because of some of the statistics we just talked about. They're not earning the incomes. They're not having the resources, and some of them are not even showing up in the leadership.
Would you date a bus driver? You. Would you date a
If he
bus
owns
driver?
the bus, if he owns
No.
it, if he owns the bus,
See, that's a
Iyanla.
problem. That's a problem. That's a problem
Okay.
because the standards and requisites, and I'm not talking about him laying on his sofa playing video games all day. I'm not talking about
Mm-hmm.
that. But the standards and the criteria that we use to measure men is off for who
Mm,
we are as women and who they are in this society. I would date a bus driver
mm,
if he loved driving the bus, if he was a man of
mm-hmm.
integrity, if he was good to his mama, if he treated me well, I would date a bus driver. But we think that it's another human being's responsibility to give us what we need instead of us building together. I can build with a bus driver.
Mm,
I'd have my little stash over on the side in my prenup, but I could build with a bus driver.
mm-hmm.
The worst relationships that I have been in have been with men who have the same level of education as I do. Again, just in terms of the nature of the relationship, the quality of the relationship, those were the worst relationships, and I think the reason why a black woman, a successful black woman, would date a bus driver or a plumber or a construction worker is because you shouldn't be dating people for what they do. You should be dating people for who they are. And that is why a successful black woman would date a bus driver. If you've been following me right here on YouTube, you know that I actually lived in Minnesota for 15 years. And one of the things that I would notice is that in terms of getting attention, it would predominantly happen when I was in urban spaces around, say, like working class, or in other words, blue collar black men. When I was around so to speak, on campus where I worked at the time, or in more educated spaces, a lot of the quote unquote men who are, I guess, training to be high value, there wasn't as much attention in those spaces. And of course, now to be transparent, and I've talked about being a plus size woman on my channel, as a plus size woman, I've noticed over the years that the majority of men who, again, show me interest have either been African or, again, like I said, they've been more on the working class, blue collar side of life. And that is something that, I'm a firm believer in going where you're celebrated, not going where you have to completely do a 180 and change yourself and be someone else, but going where you're celebrated. And so as a result, the majority of my relationships in my life have either been with African men or, by and large, men who are considered quote unquote blue collar. So when Iyanla Vanzant asked Ebony K. Williams, would you date a bus driver? I think people are sort of, the internet is talking about this. This is a very, I guess, trending topic right now. You can insert any profession. Like you could, would you date an electrician? Would you date a plumber? Would you date a truck driver? Now, the irony, and I can't speak for bus drivers, but the irony here is that many of these blue collar, so to speak, or working class jobs pay, in many cases, more than the corporate jobs. I know truck drivers who make 150, sometimes 200,000 a year. So in a lot of cases, and then we all know, even if you're dating a bus driver, it's really not about income. It's about your overhead. It's about your expenses. And I can say that as someone who's in education. I work in education. I don't make a ton, but I've been strategic about certain decisions to keep sort of my overall cost low. And by and large, I feel pretty comfortable financially. So I say all that to say, I think the real conversation is not so much about dating down and Black women always being, sort of pushed to date down. But I think the magic really lies in, looking outside of the box here, because it's not just about would the educated Black woman date the so-called blue collar guy. The conversation is also about, would you date a guy who's, 5'8" and not 6 foot? Would you, as a man, would you, does she have to be like a model thin, or are you fine with dating someone who's maybe a little bit more on the heavier side? And I think that we're constantly, as a society, sort of weighing out these different decisions. What is the cost? What is the risk? What are the benefits? And I don't mean to imply that you cannot be educated and blue collar, or educated and working class. I mean, of course, there's a lot of people who are bus drivers who have PhDs and master's degrees. I mean, you really don't know, excuse me, just because someone's a bus driver, you don't really know their background. You don't know their history, their level of education. They could be driving the bus part-time, and maybe they have, something else that they're working on. So definitely, and also I've had the most intellectually stimulating conversations with men who don't come from the academy, or who are not necessarily college educated or took a ton of college courses and things like that. I've had the most intellectually stimulating conversations with those type of guys, with those kind of men, because oftentimes, you can say, okay, well, those guys are more street smart, rather than book smart, but a lot of them are also book smart as well, and street smart. And there's a difference between, intelligence and like wisdom, or like being smart versus being wise. And just because you're smart doesn't mean you're wise, and vice versa. So there's a lot of levels to it. There's a lot of layers to it. And that none of those layers were mentioned in that commentary between Iyanla and Ebony K. Williams. It was just like sort of a blanket statement. But I think what Iyanla was getting at was this reality that you can be a bus driver and be extremely intellectual and be well-read and be probably one of the nicest people, and maybe even be educated and have some degrees, and for whatever reason you're just driving the bus because of life circumstances, or maybe you're retired, and that's just, there's so many different reasons. But yeah, I did want to make that point. You can, by and large, being blue collar, or working class, or whatever you want to call it, there's many people who go to trade, they go to school for a vocation or a trade. And they have certifications, they have certificates, associate degrees, and as I said before, by and large, in many cases, make way more than some of your PhDs. So, something to consider. Leave your comments. I want to know what you think about this. Like, share, and subscribe. And as always, stay tuned for more videos.